Okay. When Dennis asked me about talking about cover crops and corn, of course, you got limitations with corn because corn is the first crop that we plant, and we have to terminate generally when it's pretty cool and whatnot. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to venture into a few other crops too, but main thing I want to talk about is some of the challenges you run into with corn and even some of the other crops when we're planting cover crops. So there's benefits and there's challenges and also challenges. So what I kind of wanted to cover is some of the issues that we've run into and what we see. I gave a talk 2 days ago to a group over in Columbia, and talking to them, a lot of the same issues what I'm going to be talking about today. So there's suggestions for first timers and people that are alumni raising cover crops. Don't make the common mistake of planting a cover crop after harvest without thinking about what the expected benefits of these crops are going to be, because if not, you can have some serious consequences down the road. You can find yourself at the very bottom of a steep learning curve. So when you plant a cover crop, it's just like managing a cash crop. And, as Dr. Stevenson was talking about, and I'm pretty sure all the others talked about, if they mentioned any of this, is that you got to handle a cover crop like you're going to handle a cash crop. So there's going to be a lot of scouting, integrated pest management that's tied to it, but you want to make sure that you just don't go out there and plant something because your neighbor's planting it. The EQIP programs that we have with NRCS and some of these other incentive programs that some of the people are planting, if you're going out there planting just because your neighbor's planting and you say, what are you planting? I'm going to plant the same thing you do. That's a big mistake right there. They can serve a wide variety of beneficial purposes if they are selected and they're managed properly. Of course, we talk about, and these are some of the descriptions, all of you know these: protecting the soil from erosion, managing your soil moisture, providing food for soil biology and also for wildlife, improving soil structure. They provide nutrients, N, P, and K by fixation or scavenging, increasing the organic matter. We have instances where we've done some no-till and have increased 1% on some in 5 years. They attract beneficial insects. They also can suppress weeds and nematodes, but now they're not the silver bullet. In other words, you're not going to get complete weed control with cover crops. You can get good suppression, and we've already proved that on some of the work that we've done to the Northeast and the Macon Ridge research stations, where we get significant reduction of a lot of these weed species if we manage them properly. Additional source of income. We have some people that's gone in production of cover crops because a lot of the seeds we have to buy from up north. So we have people that's actually gone in production of cover crops, so it's an additional source of income and also for grazing livestock. And we have some people in this area that do graze cover crops, for their livestock. You can look at some of the common legumes, non-legumes, I'm sorry. I just threw this slide up here. It's available if you want a copy of it and contact me or whatever. But when you're looking at what you're wanting to accomplish with a cover crop, you want to study them, okay? Just don't go out there and pick some because your neighbor's picking it or this is the easiest to be able to get a hold of or whatever. Whatever goal you want. If you want to scavenge, if you're having a serious erosion problem, had a farmer call me from down south Louisiana, a landowner, and his producer is farming his land. He's got a lot of erosion. He says, what can I do? And so we're working with them. But I will tell you this, that I can go to 15 different producers and they'll ask me which cover crop I need to plant or whatever my scenario. All 15 is going to get different answers. Because everybody manages their farm differently. You manage every field differently. You have the different type of equipment. You have a different management system yourself. You operate your integrated pest management differently. So there's no one way fits all. So what you're generally going to do is you're going to find a system that works for you. So start small, find a system that works for you and carry it on from there, and you work out all the tweaks. So this is some of the ones. Some of the issues we have in this area with salt tolerance species, so there's a lot of things that you can use, and this is just some of them. Here's some of the legumes and brassicas, looking at the tolerance, and that's one of the main things. One of the things here we don't really have to worry about a lot, but with oats and some of these species, you understand if we get down to around 10, 15 degrees, it will actually terminate a lot of these cover crops that we have. So at that point, you're going to be managing residue on those. If you got another species planted with it, they're going to be growing. So there's a management practice going to have to come in there too. They also have a dark side. A lot of this is going to result from the planting and management. Attracting insects, it attracts beneficials, but also it can attract pests also. Diseases that may infect a cash crop, like if you're planting cereals in front of corn, broadleaves in front of soybeans, not in all cases, but that can exist. So there is a possibility. We had some issues with it, not yet. Scavenging nutrients, if you go out there and you plant a cover crop, if you terminate a little bit late, especially if it's a high carbon nitrogen type cover crop like cereals, you understand it takes nitrogen for these microbes to be able to decompose it. So if you go in there and plant a crop behind it, it's going to be robbing the nitrogen from the soil for that plant. So you may have to use a starter fertilizer or something like that. And that's some of the tests that we're doing actually this year. It requires extra effort, termination, and other than other winter species, requires more labor. So, you know, when you harvest your crops, you got to go out there and worry about planting or preparing to plant this stuff. So it's going to be some cost involved in that. You can cause waterlogging of the soils after termination. You understand where they're growing. The good thing about it, on a lot of our test plots, we manage them to the point we can go out there and plant before any other farmer in the parish can plant, because they're actually taking in moisture, you know, until the point that you terminate, and then they become a sponge and they can hold moisture, which has its good points too, because I have a lot of producers we worked with a national seed grant for years, and they said, you know, I made the same yield as my neighbor did. I planted cover crops, so he says, you got more cost involved, but he says, I made more money than he did because he irrigated 3 more times than I did. So you look at it from that standpoint. If you're grazing it, there can be issues with grazing. Of course, you got grass tetany, nitrate toxicity, prussic acid poisoning. So all that's got to be taken into account if you're planning on grazing. Some of the mistakes producers make, it don't matter how long they plan to cover crops, is purchasing and or planting low quality seed. We have this happen pretty much every year. We had issues ourselves with wheat last year. We planted all of our plots, none of it came up. Thought we had from high quality producer, but no, it didn't. So you want to be sure you purchase from a reputable dealer, check the seed tag, make sure you know what the germination and what the bag contents are. Do your own germination test if the information is not available. And notice this, on most all legumes, when you look at the seeding rates, it's going to be based on purulized seed unless it states differently, like bulk seed. Most of your cereals, oats, wheat, and all those, triticales, all going to be about bulk seed. So as you buy them. All of your legumes and brassicas, a lot of those are going to be on purulized seed. So you've got to be able to, you know, to come up with what that figure is. Purulized seed is a purity plus hard seed and dormant, plus the dormant times of germination. I put this in here. All of you know how to do that. I would recommend buy your seed early. Go ahead and do a germination test on it anyway, because why you want to go out there and spend all this time planting stuff and it doesn't come up. Because you understand, if you're planting a single species or a mix, they're competing. So you want to make sure that you have good seed. So, you know, you can look this up on the internet. It's pretty easy to find out, but that's how you do it. This is the other thing that we've run into. And every year producers do this. How much does my seed actually cost? You know, you say, I went and bought a bag of seed and it cost whatever. Well, let me give you a typical example with Berseem clover. Now this is, I put in there, Berseem clover, if you buy it and it's inoculated and it costs $2.95 a pound, you say, that's pretty good because it's already got the inoculant. I don't have to buy the inoculant. The problem is that if you buy Berseem clover that's been inoculated, it's not the 65% purulized seed. So if you go with the seeding rate, you know, you think that you're going to go out there and plant this stuff at 15 pounds times $2.95. Okay, we're going to spend $44.25 to plant an acre of this Berseem clover. Actually, you're going to have to plant 23 pounds because the 65% purulized seed, it's costing you $67, $68 an acre to plant this stuff. So pay close attention when you're buying this seed. You look at that seed tag. If you order a lot of clovers, some seed dealers are going to sell you inoculated seed. We inoculate all our seed ourselves, other than some of the ones we're running tests on this with. When you select cover crops or species, make sure you're addressing a specific purpose. You don't want to do it just because it can result in a catastrophe, and I've seen a lot of those. Understand what you're planting, research it. Know what the growth habits are, know if it needs a chilling period, Hairy vetch has to have a chilling period too. You can go out there and plant hairy vetch generally at any time, it'll come up. But then again, after you plant your crop and you notice the hairy vetch start coming up again, that's because some of this seed hadn't been chilled to that point. So it may come up a little bit later. The other thing that you need to do is before you ever plant a cover crop is know how you're going to terminate it. Don't wait until it gets up time termination or three or 4 or 5 weeks before you terminate. Say, okay, how am I going to do this? Am I going to incorporate this stuff in? Am I going to roll it? Am I going to crimp it? Am I going to spray it or whatever? Know how you're going to do it before you ever put the seeds in the ground. Make sure you have the equipment to handle it. If you don't have the equipment, and we run into that a lot of times too, if you don't have the equipment to be able to handle the residue or be able to plant in the residue, then you may want to hold off and go with a small amount. I never recommend anybody. This fellow that called me the other day was wanting to go in and plant 700 acres of cover crop, and I said I would start with 50. You know, get your feet on the ground, because if you don't, then what you're going to end up doing is that if you get into trouble, then you got 700 acres of trouble. Okay? So routine scouting, your consultants out there, I will tell you that you need to scout a cover crop just like you scout your cash crops. We have producers, somebody was talking about planting green. If you go out there and have your consultants constantly monitoring these cover crops to see what your beneficial and your insect pest ratios are out there, see how they balanced out, you need to know that before you decide you're going to go out there and either plant green or whatever. So you need to understand all of that. And the reason being is you got variations. Every field's different. They're none the same. So you want to scout every field that you got cover crops in. And make sure that you calibrate for each species you plant. Now, here's where you run into some issues. You know, some people drill. Most of our producers broadcast, because I will tell you a drill costs an enormous amount of money. Sometimes you can lease them, some places you can't. But if you're putting in a mixed seed and they have two different, the seeding rates are fine because you can mix that. But if they have two different seeding depths that you have to plant, you understand if you go out there and plant them, if you go out there and you incorporate some of it in, you're burying some of the seeds, so you shouldn't even plant it anyway. So you got to make sure that you don't go out there and broadcast some of the seeds that need to be planted 3/4 or inch and a half deep, like some of the sterilized triticale and wheat and stuff like that, and then turn around and plant a clover with it, and you go out there and disc it in. Well, you see what's going to end up happening. You're going to bury all the clover, and remember what the clover costs? It'll pretty much break you, and there's no need in planting it if that's what you're going to do. Planting it all at the correct time. I've already mentioned this. Don't broadcast seed. If you're going to have to plant 2 seeds, it's got 2 different seeding depths and all that stuff. Go ahead and do it with a drill. You want to consider the tillage system that you're planting in. If you got conventional tillage, you know, you got equipment, you got land preparation that you got to do. If there's no till, of course, you got a larger planting window with no till. But the thing about it is, no till generally requires a drill to plant it in. Sometimes you can get lucky broadcasting if the weather's right and all, but most times you're going to have a drill. And then again, when you no-till seeding generally, and even broadcasting, you're going to have to go a little bit higher seeding rates generally. And so we're working on seeding rates for y'all right now. So another thing is Dr. Stevenson's back here, timing of planting. You take into account any residuals into account that was applied to that former cash crop, because a lot of your legumes and brassicas, they're very sensitive to some of these residual herbicides. So cereals, you understand, you can plant them a little bit later. But a lot of these clovers and brassicas, you have to get them in really early. And that's one of the things when we're planting with corn. You say, okay, I'm planting a cover crop in front of corn. Ideally, you want it to be majorly a legume, because for the nitrogen, for the nitrogen component. Well, if you're planting a legume, you want to mix a little cereal in with it, because legumes are going to come up later on. And understand, a lot of these legumes are not going to start producing a lot of biomass or anything until late in the season, like February and March, you understand. Well, if you go in there and you plant a cereal with it, it's going to come up fast. Oats come up faster than cereal rye, generally speaking. So you would plant just a little cereal rye with it so you can get ground cover to help protect some of the weeds or get competition for your weed species and whatnot. So anyway, you want to plant in the right time window. I just went over all of this. It's pretty much the same thing. Your lagoons and brassicas are going to be more sensitive to some of these. This is a chart, and I think Dr. Stevenson and Dr. Miller have looked at this, and they've got the same ideas on some of this, but looking at some of the influence of some of the herbicide treatments on cover crops for germination or the amount of biomass, we have these. They have it also, and I'm going to remind in a few minutes, I'm going to ask Dr. Stevenson to say something about this, but we have all this information. You can access it very easily too. This termination, I talked with Dr. Miller yesterday, and I want Dr. Stevenson here to kind of either back me up or make any corrections that we need to do, because we're fixing to send this out in a publication. If I was going to talk to him earlier, but presentation wise, is when you're terminating, and this is all in active ingredients. If you got cereals and grasses, basically you just go with glyphosate at 1 pound. Wheat, most of the time, wheat should be able to control with glyphosate at 1 pound. We had a few years back, some of this older wheat coming out of, if it went into a dormancy or during these cold periods, has some issues with it and it started back up. Talk about going with either glyphosate plus clethodim at 1 pound and plus clethodim at 0.188 or 0.25 pounds active. Your legumes, excluding the clovers, 2,4-D at a ½ pound to a pound. Your clovers, dicamba, use only approved. We got some labels that are not approved for cover crops. And Dr. Stevenson, he'll maybe help me with that in just a few minutes or talk to y'all about that. At a ½ pound. Tillage radishes, sometimes you can get by with 2,4-D on it, sometimes not. Most of your tillage radishes, if we get a hard enough freeze, will knock them back pretty good. But if you don't, you have to go with lead off. You're going to have to go with a ½ ounce active or go with the ½ pound, 1 pound of 2,4-D. If you have mixes, excluding the clovers, go with glyphosate 2,4-D at 1 pound, ½ to 1 pound of 2,4-D. Your cereals and clover mixes, probably glyphosate dicamba, only approved labels, £1.5 a pound. And this is an example, is that if you go out there and you've planted a mix of rye, hairy vetch, and crimson clover, you may have to go out there with glyphosate 2,4-D and dicamba. So I put down here at the bottom, if you got specific issues, and I will tell you that we run into those every year, you either want to get in touch with Dr. Stevenson back there or Dr. Miller on those, because some of these cover crops are going to react different to some of these chemicals based on the timing of when you're trying to terminate them. And of course, legumes, we try to ideally terminate at bloom, boot stage on the cereals and stuff like that. But sometimes that gets outside that window with us. And so if you need to address that, then I would talk to them. Do those rates look okay to you, Dr. Stevenson?
8 ounces, an ounce and a half.
It's 1.5 ounces. Okay.
You're right. The lead off is pretty good on tillage radish. D is inconsistent.
Okay. We'll make that change because we are going to send this out in a publication. I've got to let them read over and approve it, but I was talking to Dr. Miller and we got this yesterday. So this is a cover crop decision tool. I think all of y'all may be familiar with that. This is the one that Dr. Atzalimi, Josh and myself put together 2 or 3 years ago. And it takes into account USDA payments. So you can go in there and actually put in whatever you're wanting to plant or what your ideal is. What we do is we update the cost on all these every year. We send him the cost of what these cost per pound, send it to him. So you can put in your information up here. Then you got the NRCS cover crop and tillage decision tool. It will actually tell you basically what you're going to end up paying after everything's done. If you're in an EQIP program, NRCS's payments are going to be included in that. So you can kind of see how this works. And let me back up. There's the site, but all you need to do is go on Google and type in LSU or Louisiana Cover Crop Decision Tool, and it will give you the information. I don't think y'all want to copy down all of that. Then y'all got any questions?